Deep Threat Sports Network fans, we are back with another banger of an episode here. Once again, you have Garrett and myself. Another episode of Foul 'em Hard. We are happy to be back. Once again, like we talk every week, college basketball is full tilt, tons of fun. We have highs, we have lows, we have teams coming alive and teams falling apart. And Garrett is really here to dissect this with us tonight. Super excited to get this one going. Once again, kind of like usual, we've got a good structure here and we love it. And all the feedback we've gotten so far, the people like it too. So we've got our top 25 tonight. Some notable scores since we last met are for better or for worse, the injury bug, and bangers of the week coming up. And also, sneak peek, spoiler alert, for all you out there know, we no longer have any conference undefeateds. So Garrett and I are going to dive into the big conferences here and talk about who we think has a real chance to win it from this point forward. So first, Garrett, how you doing, man? How was the week of basketball for you? Did you get to watch quite a bit?
Yeah, man, it was great. It's so hard, this time of year to try to catch every single game because it seems like there's a top 25 matchup, at least one, sometimes two top 25 matchups every day throughout the week. I would argue today might be the worst slate of college basketball we've seen in a little over a month, but hey, there's still some gems out there. We're going to talk about them.
Absolutely. And before we kind of went live here, Garrett and I were talking about how, yeah, man, it seemed almost and it like to put this in perspective, it wasn't a bad week of college basketball, but college basketball has been so full tilt for the last month. It just felt like, hey, you could kind of breathe a little bit here, man. We don't have 100 games that we feel like we got to hit on, just a kind of a couple here. So really going to dive deep into it. So let's lead this thing off and give you the updated top 25 this current week. At 25, we have Maryland, 24 Creighton, 23 Clemson, 22 Mississippi State, 21 Mizzou, 20 Michigan, 19 Ole Miss, 18 Marquette, 17 Kansas, 16 Wisconsin, 15 Kentucky, 14 Memphis, 13 Arizona, 12 Texas Tech, 11 Michigan State. In our top 10 here, we have Iowa State, St. John's at 9, A&M at 8, Purdue at 7, Houston 6, Tennessee 5, Florida 4, Duke 3, 2 Alabama, 1 Auburn. Garrett, the first thing I want to say before we go too far, the top 5 is littered with SEC talent. This is incredible to me that the SEC has kind of taken over in these top 25 rankings, more so now I feel than ever.
Yeah, that was going to be one of the things that I discussed after this top 25. I don't remember a time, I'm sure you would have to go back to probably like the early 2010s when the ACC was really in the SEC spot now, when they had a load of teams in the top 5, top 10, top 25. I don't know if I've ever seen 4 of the top 5 teams in one single conference. And the craziest part about that, and we're going to talk about the SEC standings, the top 3 in a little bit later. Tennessee's the number 5 team in the country. They're not even top 3 in their conference. That is how loaded that conference is this year. It's really unbelievable. Another thing that I really find alarming, and I don't, Colin, you might be able to explain it a little bit better because you're really high on them this year. St. John's at 9. Now, I know they just had a loss this week to Villanova. St. John's is much more deserving of a higher ranking than 9 in the country. They are at the top of one of the most competitive leagues in college basketball this year, and they're not getting
Yeah.
any love in this top 25 poll whatsoever. They are better than the ninth team in the country.
So, and to kind of to touch on that a little bit and not sound so homer about it because I've been all over them, and it seems like such a homer pick for me at this point. But what, like to your point, what more do they have to do? Like, what more are they asking of this St. John's team to do? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to pick on Purdue here. Purdue's a good basketball team, but in what I guess the way I look at it as a whole, like what more has Purdue done than St. John's? And I could pick it apart from some of these other teams up there. I feel like the only real teams that I could say, yeah, have done more and have proved more than St. John's. St. John's is 21-4. Like I could make a case for Auburn, obviously, Alabama, Duke. I feel like the top 3 is right. After that, I'm not trying to say St. John's is the 4th best team in the country, but I feel like you could have a home for them from 4 to 8. I feel like they should be definitely higher than what they are. And you're right. They come off that loss this week against Villanova. And for all the people out there, Garrett texted me the morning of the St. John's Villanova game and just said, don't fall for the trap. And part of me kind of thought I had a good idea. I knew what he was talking about. I said, "Hey, let me get some clarity." And he was like, "The St. John's game. Don't do it." It was a trap line. Garrett was all over it. I've talked episode and episode about how Garrett can sniff a trap line from a mile away, and he was all over that. But kind of back to it. I'm just kind of looking at it here, man. You beat a high ranked Marquette team. You beat UConn when we were doing our show last week at UConn. Absolutely dominated the basketball game. Beat Creighton again earlier in the season. I just, for me, it's what more do you kind of have to do to get a little bit more respect? You're a 21-4 basketball team, and to me, and at this point, Garrett, when these rankings came out, correct me if I'm wrong, they were 21-3 at that point. So, what do you have to do?
Yeah, that's the point I was going to bring up. They were when this poll came out, they were at 20-3, one of the best records in all of college basketball, and they're not doing it in a weak conference. They're not doing this in the ACC. They're doing this in the Big East, which is obviously not top to bottom as deep as the SEC, but man, you could make a pretty good case that that's the second best conference in college basketball. One thing that I will say about St. John's, and it's not fair if this affects their rankings or not, they are really, really bad from the 3-point line. Some of their wins are borderline ugly. I wouldn't say ugly, it's just their play style. They muck things up defensively. They take a lot of twos. They make a lot of free throws. Their play style isn't overly appealing, but still, they're winning the games they need to win, and they're winning big games, not just at home, but on the road as well.
They win the games, to your point, very ugly. Turnovers. They force a ton of turnovers, and you're going to touch on that later here, so I don't want to spoil that too much. Tons of rebounds. But also to your point, Garrett, where they really, really struggle, and we talked about this last episode down the stretch, 3-point line kills them. And to be honest with you, as many free throws as they shoot, they are horrible from the free throw line. Horrible from the free throw line. If they would just make 75% of their free throws, I just pulled it up to make sure I was correct. They're 68% from the free throw line. That is not good. And when you combine that with being back from the 3-point line, and we get into March here and we get into Big East tournament play and where it all really, really, really matters, that is a recipe not for success. So if they could kind of tweak those things and keep playing that hard-nosed defense that they've been playing, that is when they become a real potential threat to be a Final Four team. My other point I want to make here with this top 25, and I want to direct this to you, and I want you to tell me why and give me some details on if you think this is correct. Arizona at 13, and I'm not just saying this because of the loss they just came off of, but are they really the 13th best team in the country?
I don't think they're the 13th best team in the country, but I will tell you why they're in this spot. I think if, for example, if Arizona played Mizzou 10 times on a neutral floor, honestly, Colin, I think Mizzou takes 7 of them. I think Mizzou's a far better basketball team. Obviously, they're in a tougher conference, but the reason you see Arizona all the way up there at 13, they're 11-2 in the Big 12, which is I don't understand how they're at that record because man, we talk about it all the time, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but they don't look good when they play. There's nothing appealing about them unless Caleb Love has one of those games that he has once every 5 games. But they keep winning. And the reason they're in that 13th spot is because they're winning games in a respectable conference. They have to be in that spot, unfortunately. But it won't last long. I mean, I just don't see that withstanding throughout the course of the season. I know we're over halfway done, but I wouldn't be surprised by the end of the year if you see Arizona drop out of the top 25.
I'm with you on that too, because when I look at all these top 25 teams, and obviously you and I are pretty up to snuff when it comes to college basketball, but I look at all these top 25 teams, and Arizona's probably a team, and maybe this is to my discredit here, but they're a team that I know probably one of the least about because I really don't tune into a ton of Arizona basketball games because this sounds horrible. I don't enjoy them. Like, unless Caleb Love is knocking down threes from half court because he just wants to pull up, that's when like Arizona basketball is enjoyable, but it's not sustainable. So to your point, I don't feel like they're going to be here long term. Maybe that's just me being biased because I don't watch a ton of Arizona basketball games anymore. But now that they're really making this run, I'm going to have to really get in tune with them because maybe they can rattle these cages, and I need to know more about them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Colin, their roster, we talk about Caleb Love all the time. Rightfully so. He is the engine that makes this team run. If he plays poorly, they're going to struggle. But this team is fairly balanced offensively. Trey Townsend, who's a little dinged up right now, he's a pretty big point to this team. And you don't hear his name brought up a lot just because he's not putting up the gaudy offensive numbers that, Caleb Love or KJ Lewis is putting up for Arizona. But the reason Caleb Love gets all the talk is because he is Arizona basketball at this point. And
Yeah, he's the flashiest, biggest name.
if he plays poorly, you talk about Caleb Love. If he plays fantastic, you talk about Caleb Love. That's just the spotlight that he's in for that team. It's unfair to him, but man, he is very inconsistent, as we've talked about before.
Well, and I feel like to be really dangerous down the stretch to continue on, KJ Lewis has to take another step up, I think. And they are very balanced, but like on the nights that Caleb Love's not there, you're going to need Jaden Bradley and KJ Lewis to really take that next step, I feel like. And I don't even know if I'm kind of really wording that correctly. I just feel like they just need a little bit more from everybody else, even though they are balanced. They're not a scary team, man. Like you can't tell me you're scared to play Arizona in a tournament. So unless Caleb Love gets hot, like we say time and time again. So I just don't feel like that 13th ranking was really warranted yet. But you kind of convinced me a little bit when you sit down and say, "Hey, yeah, they're 11-2 in conference play, man. Let's wake up on it a little bit." So that's about all I have from the top 25. Unless you have a team that really stands out to you that you want to discuss in this top 25 rankings that you think is deserving to be more or less, or a team that's not even in it.
No, I think this is pretty good. I kind of talked about last week how I thought Creighton was the one team that was probably snubbed from that top 25 spot just because of where they stand. I know their non-conference record was not great for Creighton standards. We kind of discussed how we were disappointed at where they were just a couple weeks ago. And man, they went on one hell of a run. They were beating really good teams at home, on the road. They finally found themselves in that top 25 spot at 24. They drop a game, they'll probably end up losing their spot. But it's still a team that I think is, without a question, in my opinion, one of the top 25 best teams in the country.
Yeah, I think they're much more deserving than a team like Maryland, right? I mean, and Creighton is ranked above them, yes, but just picking on a team here that's kind of in there with them, they're a much more feared team to go play than a Maryland basketball team, or hell, honestly, what to be honest with you, Garrett, it maybe even a Mississippi State at this point. They Creighton is a really good basketball team. I've gave them quite a bit of a hard time on this show, and like I said last week, it's just because I expect more from them. I expect more from your basketball team. You have way too many star players to not do better things on the court. So I'm with you. Hope they kind of hang around. I think if everything goes well for them and stays the course, they'll obviously be in March, and I think they can make some noise in March. They could be one of those teams that's in the lower seeding ranking maybe a little bit and can really scare a team. So I'm with you on Creighton. So let's kind of turn the page off our top 25 a little bit and head into some notable scores since we last met in our last episode. And like Garrett and I kind of talked about, wasn't a slow or bad week of college basketball, just lesser than what we've had. So not as many to touch on here. So Saturday the 8th, Garrett, we had Texas Tech 73 at Arizona 82. Alabama 85 at Arkansas 81. Duke 71 at Clemson 77. Probably the most surprising game of the week, if I had to be honest with you. Maybe in contention with this next score right here. Florida 90 at Auburn 81. Marquette 67 at Creighton 77. Kansas 73 at K-State 81. A&M 67 at Mizzou 64. Garrett, tons of games you can pick from right there. Kind of dissect one or two that you want to go into a little bit of detail about. Quite a few upsets right there, if I'm being honest with you. So which one do you have to give us some more details on?
Yeah, I'm going to bypass the Florida Auburn game for now. We're going to get into that game in a lot more detail later. The game that really surprised me, and Colin, maybe it really shouldn't have. I just went back and I looked at the line for that Clemson Duke game. It was only 6. That's kind of fishy. In my opinion, that's a funny line, but man, what a week Clemson just had in college basketball. They knock off Duke and Carolina in a span of 3 days. And man, they didn't win either of those games with any kind of gimmick. They flat out took control of both of those games. I know the Duke game was pretty tight, but what a huge win for the team that you picked preseason to win the ACC. Both our
Yeah,
ACC picks look awesome. Louisville and Clemson both sitting one game back of the powerhouse of Duke. And I do want to mention, I think that game, the Duke Clemson game, goes completely different. Cooper Flag was cramping almost the entire second half of
yeah.
that game. He did not look like himself whatsoever. But still, I'm not taking anything away from Clemson. Awesome win.
It was an incredible week, and to your point, when they played North Carolina, they didn't just beat them, man. They beat the shit out of them. There was never a doubt. And to kind of freshen up on that ACC pick by us a little bit, if I remember correctly, both of us were like, hey, it's probably Duke, but we're not going chalk here. We're going to pick some other teams outside of the box. So, yeah, looking really good for those teams. Clemson is a really good basketball team when they put it all together. They've got some guys that can make some shots and in big time moments can go get a bucket. Clemson's a good basketball team. And not to spend more time on this, I just don't want to let it go unknown and then just kind of slip by it. Kansas getting beat 73 at Kansas State 81. Just Kansas State, Garrett, you and I talked about it before this episode took off. Kansas State could be the hottest team in the country right now. Coleman Hawkins has found it. K State's found it. Is it too late? It might be too late. They're gonna have to really make some noise in the Big 12 tournament, I feel, to work their way into a comfortable spot in March.
Yeah, I'm afraid it is a little bit too late. It's really unbelievable the turnaround that this team has put forth in the last 2 weeks. They're six, if I remember correctly, they're 6-0 in their last six, and they're beating good, really good basketball teams. I do want to talk about Kansas, and I mentioned this. It feels like every episode. Maybe one of those teams that when is it going to get to the point where they're not deserving of a top 25 spot? I understand it's a brand name of the Kansas Jayhawks, but Collin, they look bad every time I watch them. It really frustrates me watching this team because you got a guy, and I can say this now, you have a guy making $2 or $3 million to play for your basketball team that you bring in, and he doesn't look like he could give two shits less about being on that court at all times. It used to be when he had the ball, he seemed engaged. Now, even when he gets the ball, it's, yeah, well, just through the motions, couple dribbles, post hook, brick, jog back down on defense. This team, there's nothing good about them besides, in my opinion, DeJuan Harris is a very good point guard. But the team frustrates me. It's probably the worst Bill Self team I remember watching in years.
Well, I think too is my and I know we're live here, but is my connection still doing okay, Garrett? I kind of got a thing that came across. You still got me?
You're good. Yep, you went out for about 2 seconds, but I got you back.
All right, cool. And to your point, talking about Hunter Dickinson there, it is a very lazy effort at this point from Hunter Dickinson. And I feel like you and I talked about this really early on when we started doing this thing is who is the guy that you were for sure going to turn to that's going to go get you a bucket when you need one, especially on the nights when Hunter Dickinson takes the night off. And I feel like to your point, he's taken many of nights off here recently, and it is very frustrating to watch. I obviously, being a Mizzou fan, cannot stand Kansas, but even when I watch a Bill Self coach basketball team and I watch Kansas Jayhawks basketball, this is not Kansas Jayhawks basketball I'm used to turning on a Tuesday night or a Saturday afternoon and watching. This is really lackluster performances, not what they should be doing. Obviously, being the name brand, they have no worries in the world about missing out on the tournament or anything in that nature. But to your point, they are not the most deserving basketball team at this point anymore. And I really wouldn't be too scared of them. And that sucks to say because that is one of the biggest resume builders on Mizzou's schedule. So seeing them play this way kind of hurts a little bit. But moving on to Tuesday the 11th, had some more good basketball games. Indiana Hoosiers, Garrett, 71 at Michigan State 67. What do we have to say about that? UConn 70 at Creighton 66. Arizona 70 at K-State 73. Florida 81, Mississippi State 68. Tennessee 64 at Kentucky 75. Kentucky getting a sweep on them this year. Purdue 73 at Michigan 75. Garrett, pick some. I know you want to talk a little Indiana Hoosiers basketball here, so it's only right if you give a little discussion about the Hoosiers.
Yeah, that Tuesday slate was awesome. That was probably the best day of games throughout the entire week. I really would like to talk about all of them. Briefly, just because Indiana's not very good, I'm going to talk about the game. I don't get to talk about a win very often.
Hey, let her fly, baby.
The turning point of that game, Indiana, for honestly, Colin, the first time in, I don't even know. I don't know if I've ever seen it since I've been a fan of Indiana since 2011. They ran for most of the remaining of the first half and the entire second half. They ran a 3-2 zone. They went away from man to man defense into a zone, and Michigan State had no clue how to beat it. None. I really was surprised to see how bad they struggled against that zone, especially with the kind of coach Tom Izzo is. But I will say this: Indiana attacked the weakness of Michigan State. They are the worst 3-point shooting team in the Big Ten. And I don't know the exact number, Colin. You might have to check it. I know they were around that 22% range from three. And I tell you what, if teams want to play copycat with Indiana, they found a recipe for success against the Spartans. I know they're a good basketball team, but Colin, they can't shoot, and that's a big issue.
17.4% from three in Michigan State.
And I tell you what, I know this Michigan State team is well coached. They have decent guard play. They're always a threat any night of the week. But if you can't shoot, I don't fear you that much. And that's the reason they lost that game. Indiana goes on the road and picks up a huge win. Obviously, it's too little too late for the Hoosiers, but still a great win. Getting away from Indiana, the game I really want to talk about, and I know it probably wasn't the score that was the closest of the week, but Florida on the road with another big win at Mississippi State. The reason that's a big deal for me, you always see college teams, when they get a huge win, come out next game and lay a big, giant, fat egg. This Florida team not only answered, but they went above what I was expecting. Incredible week for Florida basketball, and it all stemmed from Walter Clayton. He was a dog in both of those games.
Real quick to go back on a little Michigan State talk and a little more to add to Florida, and then we're going to move on to the Wednesday game and then the injury bug. We talked early on in this season about how Michigan State was, for the first time it feels like in a while, really answering the bell with Tom Izzo early in the season. It almost feels like they're going the inverse of what they are usually doing at this point in time. They're working kind of backwards. And for Tom Izzo's sake, I'm a big Tom Izzo fan. I hope they're not losing it. But to your point, Garrett, they're not an entertaining basketball club right now. They're not very good on the court right now as a whole. So I think maybe they could be going in the wrong direction, and that's not what they want. And to move on to that Florida game, Florida is truly a team that honestly is a front runner to win the national championship, in my opinion. They are a team that is as scary as anybody on any given night of the week. Florida, to me, may look like the best basketball team in the country right now. I know that's big shoes to fill and a lot and high words to be spoke, but I really do think that Florida is arguably the best team in the country right now.
They had a really good week, Colin. They're still, in my opinion, too inconsistent offensively to be considered that highly for a national championship. They're obviously going to make some noise in March if they can string together some wins, but it doesn't seem like they've ever really put it together for a 3-game span like your Auburns, like your Bamas, like your Dukes. I just worry about the level of inconsistency we see from Florida time and time again.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. But to move on to the Wednesday, the 12th, was the last real big game since we've last met, and was St. John 71 at Nova 73. Garrett, do you have anything you really want to talk about too much in this game, or was this just one of those, like I said early in the episode, that fishy line that you sniffed out and you were all over? I mean, how do you feel about this one?
I just think St. John's ran into a really, really desperate Villanova team who's trying to make a push for the tournament. Obviously, on the road is never easy to win at Villanova. I just think it was a perfect recipe for success for Villanova and a recipe for disaster for St. John's. They really played a good game. They actually knocked down some threes in this one, but Nova was too much to handle.
Yeah, well, any night, Wooga Poplar and Eric Dixon both get it going. Nova can be a damn good team. I mean, Wooga Poplar came from a successful team with Miami in years past, and Dixon is one of the best players in the country. I mean, we've said that.
I
Did
got you
you
back.
lose me on my Wi-Fi right there, Garrett?
I lost you. Yep, lost you for a little bit.
Were you able to hear me?
I couldn't hear you. No, the last thing I heard was you were talking about Poplar and Dixon.
Yeah, just any night those guys can get it going. I mean, we've Wooga Poplar with Miami back in the day and had success. Dixon, we've made a case for him to win the Wooden Award. I mean, these guys are really good basketball players, and if they can get it going, they can beat most teams, especially at home.
Right.
So, moving on to the injury bug here, Garrett, why don't you tell us what's the latest and greatest on the injury report and what's some impactful injuries we have out on the slate right now?
Yeah, it's a pretty short list this week. Honestly, I like it better when it's a short list. You want to see these top guys playing. Just four guys I'm going to hit on. So you got Lamont Butler for Kentucky. Dinged up a shoulder against Tennessee. Actually left the game. He could not return. From what I've read and from what reports have been showing, he's going to be a game time decision for their next outing. But man, it sounds a little bit more serious than that. I would not be surprised if Butler misses a little bit of time. Big loss for the Cats. Sticking with the Cats, Jackson Robinson, their absolute sniper out wide. He has a wrist injury. He missed their game against Tennessee. They're trying to get him to return this weekend against Texas. It's going to be a game time decision for that. The other two are both from Florida. So we got Alex Condon for Florida, the big man down low. He got hurt on a really dirty play against Mississippi State, Colin. I'm not sure if you saw that play. You can deem it dirty. I deem it dirty. It was just one of those plays you don't want to see. Got a guy come up underneath of him. That was 30 seconds in the game. Assuming it's probably just a bad sprain of the ankle, but I would expect him out for a pretty extended period of time based on how it looked and what they are saying about that. I'd expect Condon to miss at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. And the last one is Elijah Martin. He's also for Florida. He's got a bum hip. He's actually missed their last 2 games. He's been practicing. It just sounds like Florida's not wanting to push him a little bit too hard at this point. It sounds like the hip is a little bit fragile, and from what they say, one wrong move and it's flaring up on him again. So they're going to rest him until he's fully healthy.
Yeah, which honestly, not too long of a list. That's not a bad thing. Hope to see some of these guys get back. A lot of these guys are very important to their basketball team. Obviously, the Elijah Martin thing. Yeah, let's rest him while the team's hot, and hopefully he turns the page and is ready to go here before too long. But now, Garrett, it's my favorite time of our episode. It's time to really dive into some of these games we want to spend some time on. Our for better or for worse segment. I look really forward to this. And the first one we have on the docket is St. John 68 at UConn 62. Garrett, for better or for worse, who do you got in this one?
It seems like UConn finds themselves on this list a lot. And for this particular game, I think it's a worse loss for UConn. They had every chance to win this game, Colin. Every chance in the world. This was at a point in time in UConn's season where they were really struggling. Obviously, they picked up a win since then, but this was a game that should have been circled on their calendar. And I think the reason I find this to be a bad loss for UConn is the way they lost it. 22 turnovers, 64% from the free throw line, 27% from three. They only lost by 6. And 6 doesn't even really tell you the story. This was a 2-point game with about 13 seconds left, and RJ Lewis hit a shot to give St. John's a 4-point lead. It's a game UConn absolutely had in the bag if they play 5 out of 10 basketball. They played 2 out of 10 basketball and still lost by essentially a possession. It's a game that they really, really should have had.
I'm going to go the opposite here. I agree with you on all of that, obviously. I'm going to say it's a better win for St. John's because anytime you can go play UConn at UConn and get out of there with a dub, especially when you come in 4.5-point underdogs and you can sneak one out at their place, it's a great win, man. And like you said earlier, St. John's just makes it really muddy. and finds ways to win basketball games. I'm looking at the stat line here to make sure I have it all right. They were 40% from the field, St. John's was. UConn 39% from the field. St. John's was 19% from three. UConn 27% from three. St. John's 12 made free throws. UConn 14 made free throws. Like you said, the difference in this basketball game was 22 steals, 22 turnovers for UConn, and the fact that you can make it happen. And it was just one of those games where Hurley was frustrated, UConn's frustrated, St. John's hangs around, and my favorite player in college basketball, I say it time and time again, Kadari Richmond, kind of takes the game over with the elbow jumper down low, and that guy is lethal inside, man. I've never seen a guy that when he puts his mind to it and he brings the ball up to court, gets down low, drives, pulls up, shoots, and you're confident the whole time the ball's in his hands going down the court. I love what this St. John's team does. I love how they make it really difficult on the other teams to win basketball games.
Yeah, I mean, Colin, I see where you're coming from there, and I think maybe St. John's exposed a major issue that UConn is going to have down the road if teams pressure them. Who is their primary ball handler? Who is it? I truthfully don't think they have a guy that can bring the ball up the floor and pressure. Solomon Ball's not. All he is a catch and shoot guy. Liam McNeely's a 6'9" freshman. He doesn't need to be dribbling the ball in traffic. They just don't have a guy to protect the ball. I mean, Caravan's not the guy.
No.
So where do they turn to protect the ball when you're facing immense pressure like St. John's brings? For those of you who haven't watched a St. John's game, this is the most suffocating defense. Truthfully, I've watched since Mike Anderson's 40 Minutes of Hell at Mizzou. It is balls to the walls, 40 minutes of pressured basketball. It's not just pressure on the ball. It's serious pressure off the ball. It's rebounding pressure. It's inbound pressure. These guys don't get freaking tired. And it's the whole game. They suffocate you.
It's in your face all night, man.
And they exposed UConn, and they had nobody who wanted the basketball. No one.
not to make like such a off the wall comparison, but like when you watch the movie Coach Carter, it's like that, dude. Like they are up and down the court, and all they do is run. We're just gonna run. We're just gonna run, man. Up and down the court all night long. Do not stop. They will get tired. They will miss shots. You will make them in the end because you're not tired. I think to answer your question, or really answer your question with a question, is did you think that Hurley and UConn expected more from Diarra this season to kind of be that guy to kind of take it over and be the point guard that's bringing the ball up and down the court and protecting it?
I don't know. If they did, it wasn't a very good game plan because it's not something he's used to doing. I mean, they really never addressed that need, and arguably it's the most important. I shouldn't even say arguably. It is the most important position in college basketball. If you don't have someone who can bring the ball up the floor and not throw it to the other team 22 times, you're in trouble. Like game in and game out, a lot of UConn's troubles come from pressure.
What did you and I say our very first episode wins March Madness? Guard
Guards.
play. UConn doesn't have it right now. So can they get it hot? Can they get it going? Are they well coached? All those things. Yes. But to your point, this St. John's team showed what you have to do to beat UConn. And they did it, and they perfected it. And obviously, not every team can play the style of defense of suffocation that St. John's can, which helps UConn and other basketball games. One we'll talk about in a little bit. So kind of moving off of that one, we have Texas A&M 67 at Mizzou 64. Garrett, for better or for worse in this one, how did you feel when you were watching it?
Yeah, I'm going to let you handle most of this, Colin. You're the Mizzou guy. When I watched this, I had a really hard time. I went back and forth on this one quite a bit. I'm going to end up saying it's a better win for A&M. And I understand for every road win that you say is important, there's also a home loss that is just as important and sometimes worse. I just think at this point in the season, it's a better win for A&M to find a road win somewhere in the SEC. Mizzou has some wins on their resume that really kind of put them in a good spot. I don't know how I want to word that, but they're in a good spot. Obviously, A&M is as well. But I just think at this point in the season, getting a road win in the SEC is a bigger deal than a home loss to a ranked team.
Yeah, especially when it's a 3-point game. I got a couple things on this, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because I feel like I really indulge in the Mizzou talk a lot. But Garrett, this was a game where Mizzou just didn't play well and still found themselves in the game. And to me, when you're playing a team like Texas A&M, shit happens, man. That's the way I felt when I watched this game. You didn't have your best stuff tonight. You shot 23% from three. You're 5 of 21. Not good. And that is the strength of their game. They play defense, they shoot threes, and they'll pull up from anywhere. You shoot 39% from the field. Not great. One thing I want to highlight that Mizzou did well that I've kind of dogged on them for this season, they shot 85% from the free throw line, 17 of 20. Hey, man, you can't do much better than that. Obviously, you can make three more and be perfect, but 17 of 20, I would take that every single night if you told me Mizzou played basketball tonight and they shot 17 of 20 from the free throw line. You did your job there. I think for me, where I see Mizzou struggle is in the games where they get down early, and then they got to battle back, and they kind of gasp for air a little bit because they are back, and then the wind comes out of their sails, and then they just kind of they're uphill punching the whole entire time. You go down 12-0 at home, and I don't know for people out there that watch Mizzou games or know much about it, if you've been to a game, but the Mizzou fans don't sit down until you score your first point at home. And man, you made them stand for like 5-6 minutes into the ball game, and it's 12-0. And all of a sudden, I'm like, holy shit, this could be a blowout. Well, they come back and they tie it up 2020. Great stuff. And then you kind of feel good late in the second half. You're like, wow, they're going to sneak this one out. They don't deserve this one, but they're going to sneak this one out. And then Wade Taylor just, what do you do on that shot, man? You played good defense, and Wade Taylor just throws it up, and Wade Taylor does what Wade Taylor does in big time moments and makes a big time shot. So in that moment, it was just like hey, shit happens. I do agree with you in all honesty. I feel like this was a better win for Texas A&M. I really do. It was another top 15, top 10 matchup for Mizzou, and you're right there, and you're hanging and banging and didn't have your best stuff and just come up short. So I agree. Better win for Texas A&M. Anytime you can go get one on the road at a pretty damn good environment against a top-ranked team, chalk it up. It's a good win. So the next game, unless you have anything else on that one, Garrett, or
No, you got it covered.
the next game that we're going to talk about here is Florida 90 at Auburn 81, and what a basketball game this was. And I'm going to take this one down a little bit different of an avenue than kind of what we usually have in the for better or worse segment. I know this sounds crazy. I know this sounds weird, but this was like a really good loss for Auburn. I feel like it was a reality check. I feel like it was a little bit of adversity that they're not used to. I feel like Bruce Pearl was very frustrated. This team was getting very frustrated with one another out there on the court. And this could be one of those motivating tactics like, hey, we're not an invincible basketball team. We got punched in the mouth by a team that played really, really good basketball, by a team that shot 39% from the three-point line. They were knocking down shots. They took 33 threes in that game, Florida did. And you just got punched in the mouth a little bit. And I feel like it was a really good learning experience. But also on the flip side of this, you're a team that scored 81 points, and you feel like for the most part, 81 points is you had a good night. So you just happened to got beat by a team that felt like they just wanted it more. They were out to prove something, and they did it. Better win for Florida, but Garrett, a really good learning experience loss for a very damn good Auburn basketball team.
Colin, I think that was so well said. I really do. I mean, I would have never looked at it that way because I don't think losing is ever good, personally. But there's a lot to learn from losing. If you go back and listen to the last episode, my dumb ass came out here and said, I think Florida's going to go into Auburn and get a win. I really felt like they would. And they played the perfect basketball game. The only way you're going to beat Auburn is score 90, hit 13 threes, and pray to God they don't score 91 because they're that freaking good. Florida, it looked like in the first 6-7 minutes that game was really about to get away from them. They were down within 6 or 7 minutes. They were down almost double digits. It's like, oh boy, maybe this Florida team wasn't ready for this, or maybe Auburn is just this good. Huge credit to Florida. They never looked like they panicked. It was a really, really calm, collective effort that surprised me. And it also helps when Walter Clayton plays like Walter Clayton can. If he could bring that level of consistency game in, game out, then I'm a huge believer of this Florida team. And I mean, why not? They're one of the best teams in the country. But it was such a great win for Florida. I think if nothing else, they proved to themselves we can really beat anyone in the country if we play with maximum effort, score 90 points, and hit 13 threes. We can beat anyone. But I tell you what, as good as a win as it was, all that does is fire Auburn up. It's all it does.
Well, and before I move on from that, I want to give credit to Todd Golden, man, Florida's basketball coach. Very, very well coached, and just a collective effort to really draw them together. When you, like you said, when you're down and you're in the opponent's building and the place is going ape shit, and you just say, "Hey, man, just play basketball. Just go out there and just play some basketball. Knock a few shots down, silence them a little bit, and see what happens." And like you said, they didn't panic. Fantastic, great coaching, and I love what I saw from that Florida Gators basketball. Hell, I told you just 5 minutes ago. After seeing what I saw from them in that moment, where they became a group right there and leaned on one another, hey man, you got my vote. The next game, for better or for worse, Marquette 67 at Creighton 77. Garrett, real quick, I feel like we do, and you said this earlier, I feel like we do a ton of talking about Marquette and UConn. And I feel like it's for the same reasons, because they are highly ranked basketball teams that everybody out there, that the AP voters seem to always believe in, seem to always give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't have a ton on this game. I watched it, but and once again, I was just like super disappointed with Shaka Smart basketball. I was just really disappointed. I don't have anything positive to say about the Marquette basketball team right now. And maybe that's why I'm kind of at a loss for words here. Worse loss for Marquette than I think it was a better win for Creighton, because Marquette is back against the wall, on the ropes, has nothing going for them. Congratulations, you beat DePaul this week. But I mean, good Lord, who's not beating DePaul? And that's the only thing you had going for. And it wasn't a convincing win against DePaul. So, like, this is a Marquette basketball team that is struggling to find their way right now.
Yeah, they're struggling to find an identity. And that's a really big issue at this time of the year. I mean, you should know exactly what kind of basketball team you are. St. John's knows. They're going to muck it up defensively and they're going to beat you in the paint. Auburn knows we're going to run and gun. Every SEC team knows that. Marquette has no identity to them at this point of the year. It makes me nervous because I say this every freaking episode. They have all the pieces to win. Everything they need, they have. They have one of the best guards in the country. They have a supporting cast around him that is plenty good to win. They have a coach who is good enough, what people say. He's not proving it. The game against Creighton marked their third loss in a row. And just like you said, woohoo, you beat DePaul after that. Cam Jones against Creighton goes 11 for 19. Very Cam Jones-like game. His supporting cast went 15 for 53. It seems like any night Cam Jones struggles, his supporting cast plays well, which I guess that's what is supposed to happen. But when Cam Jones plays well, you just need your supporting cast to give you a little, just a freaking little, and you're going to win. And they got nothing out of them. And I'm convinced it's because Shaka doesn't really understand how to get these guys going if Cam Jones has it. If Cam Jones has it, it's all or nothing through him. And they've got to find a way to keep the other guys engaged and involved, or it's going to be a train wreck, just like we saw against Creighton. And Creighton's a great basketball team, but Marquette is reeling. And man, it's a game they just needed to win, and they still couldn't find a way to go in there and prove to anyone that they could win these kind of games.
Is it wrong of me to say, like, I feel like when Shaka's best players aren't playing their best basketball, he doesn't know what to do. Like, I hate dogging on Shaka so much, but man, he just does not do it for me anymore. I've gave that guy so many benefits of the doubt, that I just can't do it no more. I've turned the page on Shaka Smart basketball right now, and I hope he proves me wrong because I'm not a fan of him. I'm turning the page on him for a little bit, and he's on a prove it basis back with me now, and I feel like Marquette should feel damn near the same way. And to turn the page a little bit to another team that's struggling really bad right now, that is kind of seeming back against the wall, trying to find their way, is UConn 70 at Creighton 66. Garrett, another team like we just talked about, always talking about UConn basketball. What do they have to offer right now, for better or for worse? How do you feel about this one?
It's a great win for UConn. I mean, it's funny how the Big East always find themselves in these better or worse, and it's partly because the Big East is really good. It's a better win for UConn until Dan Hurley does Dan Hurley shit after the game. And it's like, you've just taken that whole win, and now I don't care anymore. Like, you look like a dumbass. It just ruins any sort of momentum that this UConn team brings into that win. So for that reason, just simply because of that reason, I'm going to say it was a worse loss for Creighton. And there are reasons to back this. Obviously, St. John dropped a game at Villanova. Creighton has a chance to tie this conference up at the top. They dropped the game. Now they still find themselves a game back from St. John's. It's such a bummer that anytime UConn gets a win, a big win, or a loss, all eyes go to Dan Hurley. And I just wish it wasn't that way, because UConn used to be one of those teams that everybody said, man, I would be okay if they ended up winning. Like, I like UConn. It just
Yes,
used to be the case. It always used to be like yeah, go UConn, like America's team almost, but a small America's team. Now it's like, I hope they lose every freaking game just because I want to see what their coach does.
he cast a net over the fact that Liam McNeely scored 38 points and had 10 rebounds. He cast a net and overshadows what greatness they had in the basketball game, acting like a total dipshit, dude. You are a national championship coach. You're a national champion, dude. Act like it. You're having a little bit of adversity and you don't enjoy it right now. Get over it, man. When you win national championships and you go to another team's venue, they're going to give you a hard time. That is what they're there to do. That is what student sections do. Get used to it, man. If you can't, and nothing against the Big East is a great, great basketball conference. But man, if you can't deal with a little bit of adversity and a little bit of smack talk in the Big East, buddy, you're never going to find your way like in another conference. I mean, I've gone to many SEC games, and goodness, man, they find that you have a weakness, they are going to break you down, man. And I just expect better of him. And like you said, just quit overshadowing what your team has done, good, bad, or otherwise, man. Just be a coach. Get your ass off the court and go to your press conference and don't sound like a dipshit. Do your job. Coach a basketball game.
And it's unfortunate because it was arguably one of the biggest wins UConn has had of the season. And I don't care. I do not care about it. I don't even want to give them credit where credit's due. I mean, Liam McNeely had an all freshman type performance that you will ever see on the road. And honestly, Colin, I never saw a tweet about it. I never heard ESPN talk about it. Nowhere talked about the performance of Liam McNeely. And it's all on Dan Hurley. And at some point, it's going to end up becoming a bigger problem than it already is.
Well, and that's why I felt the need to drop the fact that he had double double with 38 points, dude, is because to your point, nobody out there talks about this. All you see on social media and shows and whatever is the fact that, oh, Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley did this. Video of Dan Hurley. How about we show some videos of McNeely knocking 5 threes down and having 10 rebounds along with 38 points? Just, just shit you can't do as a head basketball coach of a champions caliber program. Unacceptable. But let's get off Dan Hurley for a little bit and move on to what I mentioned earlier. We had conference undefeated talk as long as we could make it happen. And I think this was last week where you and I said, how long do we think it lasts? Who lasts the longest? Hey, neither. We're here. Let's talk about it. Garrett, you had a great idea. We're going to turn the page off of that a little bit and give conference updates from the Big Five basketball conferences and kind of make our pick of what we have left. So to lead things off, to list the top three in the ACC, we have Duke 13-1, Louisville 12-2, Clemson 12-2. Garrett, obvious answer is Duke, right?
Yeah, Duke is the obvious answer, but it is kind of cool. We had a very similar discussion to start the year where it was Duke is the answer, but let's choose a team. And both of our teams are up there. So, heck, if we're not going to go Duke, I'll stick with Louisville. I think this team is very together. I think Chucky Hepburn is one hell of a point guard, and they've surrounded him with shooters everywhere. Everywhere. This I love tuning into Louisville games just to watch and see how many threes they're going to take and make. So with that being said, I'll see if Louisville can get it done. I don't see Duke losing another conference game.
Hey, I'm going to ride with you. I'm going to pick Clemson and Chase Hunter. Hey, I picked them early on. I'm going to keep picking them now. The benefit for Clemson is they don't really have a tough game left on their schedule. If I'm being honest with you, I'm going to pull it up here, make sure I get this right real quick. Their hardest game left on the schedule is maybe at Virginia. So if you clean slate this and hope Duke has a hiccup, hey, it just might happen. But you got to play good basketball, and you're on a prayer that Duke drops another one. They're pissed off. They learned from the loss. Probably won't happen again, but it just might. Moving on to the Big 12, we have Houston 12-1, Arizona 11-2, Texas Tech 10-3. If you would have asked me before this week and Tech dropped one, I would have gave you like, hey, I think Texas Tech could probably run down Houston. Obvious answer is Houston for me.
Yeah, these first two conferences are pretty much self-explanatory. I think the ACC is probably locked up with Duke. I think the Big 12 is probably locked up with Houston. I don't see Arizona giving any sort of threat. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't finish in the top three in the Big 12. I just see a downfall coming for both Tech and Arizona. I think this is Houston's to lose.
I To your point, I think this is Houston's to lose because I agree with you 100% that I don't think Arizona and Texas Tech are built to last a long time in this chase. But I'm gonna throw one thing at you real quick. I looked at this earlier. Houston's schedule down the stretch does leave it an opportunity for somebody else in the Big 12 to come win this thing. They play at Arizona State, home against Iowa State, at Texas Tech, home against Cincinnati, home against Kansas, at Baylor. Garrett, that is probably arguably one of the hardest remaining schedules in maybe all of college basketball. I mean, that is a grind right here to wrap this season up.
It's a grind, but luckily, a lot of those big games they have at home. I think you said Iowa State was at home, Kansas was at home. Is
Yep.
that correct? Both those are at home. I wouldn't be surprised, Colin, if they sweep that board. I really wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they don't lose another conference game. Houston's legit. They're not talked about enough, but they are a
Yeah.
they remind me a lot of St. John's, but a better shooting St. John's. They are
Better shooting. Yep.
suffocating defensive wise, but they shoot the ball a lot better.
Yeah. Iowa State at home and Kansas at home is huge. You do play at Arizona, Texas Tech.
I
Probably, I mean, you're the better team in both of those games, and we're not. And neither one of us are big on Texas Tech or Arizona or Iowa State. I was big on Baylor, but good Lord, nothing works for them right now. So you're right; they'll probably sweep it.
if they lose a game, they're going to lose at Baylor because Baylor's hard to play at as a top ranked team.
Oh,
Always.
and maybe Baylor has it all together on their last game of the season. I don't know. Maybe that's the game that pushes them to be a tournament lock right here at the end or something. I don't know. I'm still on a prayer with Baylor because I was so high on them coming into this season. Moving on to the Big East, we have St. John's 12-2, Creighton 11-3, Marquette 10-4. I'm riding with the Johnnies, baby. You guys already know that.
I'm going Creighton. I think Creighton is the best basketball team in the Big East from offensive, defensive standpoints. Here's the worry that I have with Creighton. I think they're a little bit soft. I don't think they have a guy on that roster who, when the times get tough, will really punch back. I think Kalkbrenner, even though he's 7'8", I don't think he's tough enough to really fight when the game is in the balance. St. John's is going to punch them right in the throat. I mean, I don't know if Creighton can withstand that sort of pressure on a night-to-night basis if they played St. John's 10 times. But I do think they're a better basketball team than St. John's. So I'm going to take Creighton to come out on top of the Big East.
Creighton, top to bottom, is the better basketball team. I'm with you on that. I just obviously seeing what St. John's has done, being on St. John's so early, it's so hard to go away from them now. I talk about him every episode. Kadari Richmond is the man, and Patino is fantastic coach, knows what to do in these situations. That's why I lean with them. If Creighton gets hot, man, they're a team that could rattle cages all across the board at any moment, any week. Moving on to the Big Ten, this is a conference for me that is just not the most entertaining right now. I don't feel like they have the team that could really dominate in March. And correct me if I'm wrong if you feel a different way, but our top three there is Michigan 11-2, Purdue 11-3, Michigan State 10-3. My answer, not to just try to take it over real quick, but I'm going to take Purdue because of their guard play. That is the only reason for me.
Yeah, I think like 2 weeks ago I said, and I'm going to own up to this. 2 weeks ago I said I would take Kasparis Jakobchonis over Braden Smith. That has not panned out to be a great take.
You jinxed that guy, dude, because until that moment, everybody in the country would have agreed with you.
Jakobchonis looked incredible, and it may just be a freshman lull that he's hitting, but Braden Smith has also hit his stride. I mean, Braden Smith is the best point guard in the Big Ten, without a question. And Purdue goes as he goes. I really want to see Fletcher Loyer play a little bit better basketball. If he plays 5 out of 10, I mean, right now he's playing like a 2 out of 10. I mean, Fletcher Loyer is doing virtually nothing to benefit this Purdue team. In my opinion, it's really all Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn that make this team go. I think this is their conference to lose, in my opinion. I don't think Michigan can hang up there on the top spot just because I don't necessarily love their play style. Starting 2 7-footers is interesting. I think it's kind of a recipe for disaster some nights if one of those bigs it's an interesting style that they're throwing out there. It's working right now. It will not work in March because they're going to run into a team that runs 4 guards, and one of those bigs is going to have to try to guard somebody who's 6'5" and faster than light. So I think it's Purdue's to lose.
Yeah, without a doubt for me. TKR, too, is also the best player on this Purdue team. Purdue is damn good again. And I talked before earlier on in our shows about how I think there's as crazy as this sounds and probably as unpopular as this opinion is, there's a real case to be made that they are a better basketball team moving on away from Zach Edey now. Like there is a real avenue for that in March they could really be a better basketball team matching up without him. Kind of log jamming it a little bit and only funneling through him. So I think Purdue is the real deal.
I will never agree with you on that. Zach Edey was, truthfully, I'm trying to think of, I think Zion was probably more dominant in college than Edey. I've never seen someone like Zion and Edey. I mean, they're both specimens that you don't see come into the game very often, but I've never seen a guy just be able to change the entire game simply because of his size. I mean, you could not go into the paint against Purdue because your shot was blocked and there was nothing you could do against them. The only reason they got beat is because they ran up against a UConn team in the national championship that was so athletically gifted that no one had a chance to beat them.
Yeah, I guess my point on this is I just feel like it allows the guards to play a little more freely. And to back you up on your defense on that too is why do anything other than just drop it off to Edey inside and just let him play a little bit of defense? It was just I guess maybe I was just so chapped watching the repetitive motion all the time. Hey, the guy can't stretch the floor, but he's going to get down there here in a second. He's going to log jam it up. He's going to go down on offense. He's going to get fouled, make his free throws. So, yeah.
I think the problem I have with the way this Purdue team has progressed, regressed, whichever way you want to go since Zach Edey's gone is Braden Smith has clearly taken that step up. I mean, Braden Smith is maybe one of the harder guards to game plan for in college basketball. Fletcher Lawyer is the one who his whole success was because of Zach Edey. I mean, you had to
Yeah,
send a
yeah.
double to him, and Fletcher Lawyer got wide open threes, which he knocked down. Now, Fletcher Lawyer doesn't have that luxury. I mean, he's got a guy draped on him, and he can't get space for himself. He's not athletic enough to get any space. Kaufman Wren doesn't demand a double team. I mean, he's a really good big, but you don't have to double Trey Kaufman Wren, which the only way you're going to score now as a guard for Purdue is to generate yourself, which Braden Smith can do, Fletcher Lawyer can't.
Yeah, and hey, that's the Fletcher Lawyer take on that is 100% probably correct and the right way to look at that. He got open because there was a guy down on the bottom that demanded everybody's attention. So that you're 100% correct on that. Moving on to the SEC, this is, and I'm not just trying to be an SEC guy, but this is where I think the best basketball we can watch down the stretch be played is Auburn 10-1, Bama 10-1, Florida and A&M locked in at 8-3. This is a two-horse race to win the SEC conference, I think, but I do think that there are many teams in the SEC that can come out and compete for a national championship. But right now, where it sits with Auburn and Alabama, Garrett, that game's coming up, and I want to say the answer is just Auburn right here because of what I've seen. But I may lean into Alabama a little bit because my boy Nate Oates.
I don't know. I mean, seriously, that's about as good as I can give you. I don't know. Who's better? I think Auburn's probably the right answer, but I think if they played 10 times, I think Alabama gets hot enough from 3 and 5 of them that they win. And the
If
two,
they play 10 times, it's 5-5, in my
I
opinion.
truthfully think it's 5 and 5. The only reason it might be 6-4 in advantage of Auburn is because Cliff Amore for Alabama plays like a wussy, and I think Janiah Broome will own him.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, if you, it's two of the most even teams fighting for the top spot in the SEC. It's going to be so fun. I can't wait till they play each other. I also want to say, top three in the SEC were Auburn, Bama, Florida, and A&M. The number 5 team in the country is also in the SEC, not in the top three.
It
That would be Tennessee. How crazy is that?
And that's just what makes it so hard to pick the winner of the SEC at this point, right? These teams are just beating the shit out of each other week in and week out. I'm going to throw one thing out there in this Alabama Auburn race that I think it's between. And I think my X factor for Alabama to win the SEC is Grant Nelson. If this guy, not that he's not coming into his own already because he already has, but if this guy continues to take strides and continues to play hard-nosed basketball, continues to be tough, can knock down some big shots for them down the stretch, Grant Nelson's my X factor. Would love to see him get that three-point percentage up a little bit. It's somewhere in the 25 to 27 range, I believe. Would love to see him have a little bit more confidence to knock down some more, stretch the floor a little bit more, open it up some. Grant Nelson, I think, is a really, really good basketball player, and I think he is my X factor to give Alabama the edge to win the SEC. And like you said, I don't know.
That's a really good take, Colin. I mean, I don't think Grant Nelson has played up to his standards at this
No,
point. I think he's the second most important player on this Alabama team. He's able to stretch the floor from a big man position. Just hasn't shot it like he's normally capable of doing. I mean, last year, I don't know what his percent was last year. I know it was up in the mid 30s. He was a great shooter last year. He'll find it. It's just a matter of when. Maybe his best time is still yet to come.
absolutely. And I want to say him too because everybody's going to say Janai Broome, Mark Sears. Well, of course, those guys have to play well for those teams to be well. Otherwise, we're not talking about how they're 10-1 in conference play. So that is why I go this direction with this situation. But hey, man, no more conference undefeateds. We've laid that conversation to rest. We're just going to give you guys an update on the top 5 conferences every week and just see how we're shaking out. We're coming down to the thick of it now, and this is where it really heats up for all the marbles. These teams cannot afford to lose games down the stretch here at this moment. And with that being said, we have bangers of the week. Going to make our picks, talk about these bangers of the week, and then we're going to leave you guys with that. So Saturday the 15th, we have number 16, Wisconsin, at number 7, Purdue. Obviously, we don't know spreads. We remind you that every week. But Garrett, Saturday, Wisconsin, Purdue, who you got in this one?
I think it's going to be Purdue. They're coming off a loss on the road against Michigan. It's a really good bounce back spot for them. I don't think Wisconsin offensively has enough to keep up with Purdue, especially in Mackey Arena. It's arguably one of the most underrated home court advantages in all of college basketball. It is incredible. I think Purdue wins this one pretty convincingly, honestly.
Purdue comfortable. That's all I got to say in this one. Purdue comfortable. Next game, number 6, Houston at number 13, Arizona. Garrett, I'm going to take it first because I think we're the same on this. Houston, comfortable.
Humble time for Arizona.
Yep. Punch them in the mouth. I think that happens unless Caleb Love shoots 50% from three. This is a Houston dub. Number 1, Auburn at number 2, Alabama. Garrett, flip a coin.
Auburn.
Grant Nelson finds it. Give me Bama, baby. Just talked about him. This is the X Factor game. This is where he proves himself. This is where he comes alive. This is where he spots up in the bottom of the key shooting three. This is what it's all about for Grant Nelson right here. Time to shine. Give me Alabama. You're taking Auburn. Love that we're different on that one. And, hey, by the way, too, don't miss that basketball game. Anybody listen to us, do not miss that basketball game. Has the potential to be the best basketball game of the season before the tournament.
It may be the two best college basketball teams you will ever watch. Truthfully, it's two of the best I've ever watched.
Yes, and they're going head to head on a Saturday for your ass. Number 22, Mississippi State at number 19, Ole Miss. Got a little bit of a rivalry here. Garrett, which direction you leaning?
I'm going to take Ole Miss just because they're at home. I think Mississippi State's the better team, but I'll take the home team and Ole Miss.
Man, you're making me a little reserved in my answer here. Give me Ole Miss comfortable. I think this is a comfortable win for Ole Miss. Give me Chris Beard's basketball team in this one. Sunday the 16th, kind of just got one good game, one good banger for you here. We got number 24 Creighton at number 9 St. John's. This could be a fantastic – this has all the potential to be the second best basketball game you watch in the coming week behind Auburn, Alabama. Garrett, how you feeling?
I've already kind of talked about it. If Creighton can protect the basketball, they're going to win the game. If they can limit the turnovers, somewhere in the 10 to 12 range, I don't want to see more than that. They can win because they're much better offensively.
If St. John's didn't just lose to Villanova, I'd surprisingly probably pick Creighton here, but St. John's coming off that loss. I'm going to take St. John's. Patino gets them right. Monday the 17th, we have number 13 Arizona at Baylor. Humble week all the way around for Arizona. Give me Baylor.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is going to be a wake-up call for Arizona. They're going to find themselves in a tough spot. They're going to lose both to Houston and Baylor, both possibly big.
And this is one of those games that you and I talk about sometimes, like in our chat or texting, whatever you want to call it. This is a gotta-have-it game for Baylor. Baylor has to have it. Scott Drew knows this. Baylor wins this basketball game. And once again, I'm going to say comfortable. Tuesday, the 18th. Got a triple header banger here for you. We got number 7 Purdue at number 11 Michigan State. Make this short and sweet for me. Give me Purdue.
I want it to be Purdue, honestly, but my heart tells me Purdue. But I'm going to go with Michigan State. They just came off a home loss against a bad Indiana team. Izzo's going to have these guys ready to go. They've got to find a way to stop Braden Smith.
This is a gotta-have-it game for Michigan State, kind of like we just talked about with Baylor. So that more than likely those come to fruition. But I'm going to stick with Purdue in this one. Number 8 A&M at Mississippi State. Garrett?
I love A&M. I think their guard play is one of the best in the country. Obviously behind Auburn, Alabama, I think they have some incredible guards. I'm going to go with A&M.
Yeah, I'm going to go A&M here. You know what? Just to go opposite, to not make things so even kill across the board. Give me Mississippi State, actually. Obviously not real convincing for me right there, since I was leaning A&M. But give me Mississippi State if they lose to Ole Miss. I think they can come back and bounce back and get a home W here, protect the court. Illinois at number 16, Wisconsin. Illinois' got to have it. Do they get it?
No, I don't think so. Wisconsin's such a hard place to go into and win. This Illinois team's just going the wrong direction. I mean, 3 weeks ago, I really honestly thought they had a chance to win the Big Ten, and they just When Conspiracy Jonas started going downhill, this team started going downhill. They need it bad, but I don't think they get it.
I don't think they get it either. I don't think they get it either. Give me Wisconsin. And that leads me to this next game. Wednesday 19th, we have number 2 Alabama at number 21 Mizzou. Garrett, you go first.
The only chance they have to win this is if Alabama struggles offensively. I don't think you can necessarily stop them. I don't think a defensive team can shut Alabama down. They just have to miss shots. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Tide handle business. But Mizzou has proven to be a very tough place for top 5 teams to come in and play.
Mizzou has to shoot the lights out from 3. They have to play suffocating defense, forcing tons of turnovers. They have to get Mark Sears off his spot. That's the only way they win this game. I'm going to be the first to tell you I'm a Dennis Gates fan for the most part. I've mentioned on here before how I'm not a fan of his rotations. This is a game where you got to play your best players and your best players only. This is not a game. Hey, I like Aiden Shaw. I think Aiden Shaw is a very good basketball player. I don't think he's a very good Division I basketball player at this point. Plays good defense. But this is not a game where we're going to get Aiden Shaw some minutes. This is a game where we're going to play our best players, and you have to do that. I also don't think, with that being said, Dennis Gates can outcoach Nate Oates. So obviously I'm going to go with my heart here and pick Mizzou. Do I think that's realistic? Garrett, probably not. So
No.
the smart play is Alabama.
Yeah, you mentioned bringing up, you said they got to play suffocating defense. I don't think suffocating defense slows this team down. I don't think you can speed Mark Sears up to a point where he starts turning the basketball over. I really don't. I think in order to beat them, Alabama just has to have an off night.
Yeah, he's as poised of a guard as anybody in the country. So, yeah. Don't really have any good X's and O's to tell Mizzou in this basketball game. Just hope you shoot the lights out. That's all you can say. Hope you have a performance like Tennessee did against Mizzou, where you shoot like 70% from 3. That's what you need, truly. And what scares me too is these really good basketball teams know how to beat Mizzou now. It is suffocate Caleb Grill and don't let any bullshit happen from him. And that's where they lose games.
It's also scary because Bama could be coming off a loss.
Yes, yeah, and if they're coming off a loss, buckle up. You are in for a paddling. That's all I have to say, man. With all that being said, Garrett, unless you have anything else for us, I think you and I covered it once again. We dive deep into this thing, and it's such a blast doing this with you. I love talking college basketball with you, but I don't have anything else on the slate here. So if you got anything else, give it to me real quick, and I'll take us out of here.
I got nothing, Colin. Got nothing.
All right, man. Well, looking forward to another great week of basketball. Make sure you guys are all tuning in out there, and you can follow us on X at DT_sports_, Facebook, Deep Threat Sports Network, Instagram, Deep Threat Sports with a Z, TikTok, Deep Threat Sports Network, YouTube, Deep Threat Sports, Spotify, Deep Threat Sports. Garrett, looking forward to doing this with you again next week. We'll be back again next Thursday to talk some more college basketball. Once again, that's Garrett. I'm Colin. This is Fallon Hart. Until next time, brother. Peace.
Peace out.